In the year 2000, BHP Billiton had a problem. Their Octedi mine had contaminated the Fly River in Papua New Guinea and affected the livelihoods of thousands of villagers. Oxfam Australia helped the villagers to take BHP Billiton to court after attempts at negotiation failed. BHP Billiton lost and were fined $1 billion Australian dollars. To their credit, BHP Billiton asked Oxfam to assist them to learn how to better relate to communities to avoid making the same mistakes in the future. Oxfam agreed to design a program for BHP Billiton executives to help them understand how to build relationships based on dialogue. Traditionally, companies have used force, such as police and military intervention, and power, such as political donations, legal battles and advertising campaigns, to gain access to new resources. Oxfam was proposing a third way: dialogue. So what is dialogue and how do we do it? Some company personnel say to me that they don't need training in dialogue. After all, they're friendly, outgoing people who find it easy to talk to others. While being friendly is helpful, if you want to have dialogue, it isn't enough. Dialogue is a professional discipline where the practitioner deliberately and carefully listens to the community member, seeks to understand their concerns and aspirations, and accurately reports them back to the company for a response. Dialogue is more than chit-chat. In dialogue, it is very important to listen carefully to what people are saying. Unfortunately, most of us are poor listeners. We hear the words people say, that is, their text, and we change their actual words into our commentary. Commentary is what we think people say, not what they are actually saying. Commentary is usually inaccurate. In dialogue, we listen to and use the actual words that people say to us. I'm now going to outline the 4 principles of dialogue. If we use these principles, it will help us to build relationships of trust with community members and other stakeholders. In fact, whenever we need to have an important conversation one-on-one with another person at work or in our families, understanding and using these principles can be extremely helpful. Principle 1 in dialogue was developed by Rabindranath Tagore, the great Indian Nobel laureate. He understood that to build relationships of trust that enabled people to be empowered, you first had to see the world through their eyes. This is especially difficult for professionals who are trained to have all the answers. However, to be successful in dialogue, you must understand that you do not know. To really see the world as others see it, or to stand in their shoes, we have to understand at a deep level that we do not know what they are thinking and what they need. The famous Australian Indigenous activist Vincent Lingiari said, "One of the keys to leadership is the ability to take off your own shoes and to stand comfortably, intelligently and sensitively in the shoes of others." Principle 2 in dialogue is about building bonds of trust. We do this by leaving our world and entering the world of the other person. The German philosopher Martin Buber described 3 bonding movements in dialogue. In the first movement, we make ourselves present to the other. We say our name, where we are from, and what our purpose is. We may ask questions such as, "How are you today?" Not for our own purpose, but to focus on the other person and put them at ease. The first movement is not long-winded, but provides sufficient information for the person to understand who we are and why we are there. The second movement occurs when the person responds to us. This may be welcoming or a warning. Often people are not happy with the presence of people from resource companies. Whatever the response is, we respect it. In the third movement, we respond to the response. We focus on the person, we pay attention to what they have said, and we use their text. We leave our world and our agendas to one side and we enter their world. In this way, we create the beginnings of a relationship based on trust. People often say at this point, "How can I remember and use all the words people say to me? This isn't realistic." Luckily, the Brazilian educator Paulo Freire helped us to understand that some words are more important in the text of dialogue than others. He gave us Principle 3 in dialogue, which is to identify and use the key words that people say. He noticed that people were often stuck in their problems. He said that to assist people to move from helplessness to taking action, we need to focus on 3 kinds of key words. Firstly, we need to listen for key words that contain a positive resource. An example would be, "Our children are our future." "I would love my children to have a better education than I had." The children and education are the resource words. Secondly, he said, we should listen for the words that indicate an intention to take action. An example would be if someone said, "I wish we could build our own houses rather than waiting for the company to provide them." Thirdly, we need to identify words that show the person has thought carefully about the issue. In the text of the dialogue, we listen for and use these key words to help people move towards their own solutions. So far, we have left our world, entered the world of the other, and listened for and used their key words to create the beginnings of a bond of trust. In Principle 4 in dialogue, we seek permission to vary the key words people have used to help them find a pathway towards action. We have identified 5 helpful variations in Principle 4 that involve asking questions and changing the text in the dialogue. Because we're changing people's actual words, we need to make sure we ask their permission. Firstly, we ask people to move from generalised statements to being more specific. For example, we could say, "You have said that your housing is the biggest problem. Can you tell me if it is the cost of your housing or the size of your housing or some other issue?" Secondly, we ask people to identify their future dreams and hopes, rather than focus on the problems of the past. For example, we could say, I hear you are very concerned that the survey team did not ask your permission to come onto your land. I apologise for this. What process would you suggest we should use in the future so this doesn't happen again? Thirdly, we help people move from being immobilised by the big problems to identifying small, manageable issues that they have the capacity to address. We could say something like, we need to address many issues, but is it okay if we start with this one? Fourthly, we try to avoid using objective company language such as impacts, programs, corporate guidelines, and instead we try to relate to the issue as experienced by the people. We might ask questions like, how did that make you feel? Or can you tell me your story? In order to get inside the issue people are experiencing. And finally, if we have built a good relationship with people, we might, with great caution, put our commentary into text. If we have a hunch that there is something blocking the person or the community that they can't put into words. An example would be, I have been noticing that people don't talk about the funding for that project. Is it okay if I ask you, has the money been misused? The story of the Octedi mine in Papua New Guinea is not an isolated aberration. There are many similar stories in Latin America and elsewhere where the use of force and power by resource companies creates mistrust, impacts communities, affects corporate reputations, and costs time and money through project delays and litigation. Dialogue offers an alternative approach to get better outcomes for all parties in resource development.